name is Stephanie Otts. I'm the director of the National Sea Grant Law Center. And in the interest of time, we have lots we want to cover today. We'll go ahead and get started. But yeah, continue to share where you're all coming from in the chats. So just real quick, for those who might be new to our work, the National Sea Grant Law Center was founded in 2002. We're one of the 34 Sea Grant programs around the country. We're hosted at the University of Mississippi School of Law, and we were established to conduct legal research, education, and outreach for the Sea Grant Network and their stakeholders. And so just encourage you, if you're not familiar with our work, to check out our website. All of our publications and resources are on there. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Gina, our facilitator for the project, to introduce herself.
Thanks, Steph. Hi, everybody. My name's Gina Weatherup. I am the founder and CEO at Chantilly Mediation and Facilitation. So at Chantilly Mediation and Facilitation, we are very process focused. We are not at all experts in any of the wonderful sea-related research that you all conduct and work on every day, but we get to help Steph figure out what are the ways that we can best help everyone to interact as you're learning information from the Law Center. My partner and administrator is Mandy Myers. She is here today as the tech host. Mandy, would you like to say hello?
Hello, all. Happy to be here. I'll be monitoring chat, and if you guys need anything specific, just let me know.
Absolutely. So if you run into any technical issues at all, but your Zoom chat is working, go ahead and send Mandy Myers a private message and she will help you out. Steph, let's look at our Florida team. Oh, I'm sorry.
No, that's great. No, good. So we just wanted to, a lot of people may know me, Stephanie Otts. I mentioned I was the director, but we actually have a couple other folks from the National Sea Grant Law Center that are involved in the project. So I'll let them just, quickly introduce themselves. Lauren, do you want to say hi?
Sure. Hi, everybody. Lauren Freeman, I'm the project coordinator, and I am here for project support.
Yeah. And if Amy's on, Amy can say hi as well.
Hi, I'm Amy. I'm the Ocean and Coastal Law Fellow at the Law Center, and I just kind of help with research and writing and everything.
Thanks, Amy.
Thanks, Amy. Okay. And
hi, I'm Sarah Lester. Can you hear me okay?
Yep, go right ahead.
So my lab in the Department of Biological Science at Florida State University, one of the research focuses in my lab is aquaculture, and the team of folks that are involved in that, besides myself, are my PhD student Lily Bradshaw, who's going to be pretty involved in this project. I don't know, Lily, are you there and want to say hello?
Everyone, I'm Lily. Like Sarah said, I'm the graduate assistant on this project.
Great, thanks, Lily. And then also my PhD student, Haley Lemoine, has been quite involved in earlier versions of this project. And then Dr. Besruff was a postdoc on the previous version of the project that we'll be talking about a little bit today. And the aquaculture research that we do includes some research on global patterns of aquaculture expansion, and then state aquaculture policy in the US, and then also some work looking at the social perceptions of aquaculture. And you're welcome to check out my lab website if you want to learn a little bit more about that work.
Great. Thanks, Sarah. Just real quick, some housekeeping. We have everyone entering on mute to cut down on background noise, but please use the chat at any time if you have questions. If we see them and can answer them in real time, we will, but we also have time at the end for Q&A. We are recording the webinar because we know that there's a lot of interest in that, and not everyone can join us today. So this will be posted on our webinar after in a couple of days after the webinar. And as Gina mentioned before, if you've got tech issues, please private chat Mandy, and she'll do what she can to help. So with that, we're going to turn it back over to Sarah to give us a little background about how we got to what we're talking about today.
Thanks, Steph. Yeah, we thought it would be helpful to share some of the previous work that led us to the current project. Next slide. And so this started with a component of a project that was co-led by myself and Holly Froelich at UC Santa Barbara and funded by NOAA Sea Grant's Aquaculture Grant Program. And this work was really motivated by the knowledge that effective policy and governance can play a really critical role in supporting the development of new and growing industries like marine aquaculture. And although the vast majority of existing marine aquaculture production in the United States occurs within state waters and is therefore regulated by a potentially quite complex collection of state policies, we realized that we lacked a more holistic understanding of the status of state mariculture regulations and policies across the US. And so we were interested in starting to more systematically compile policy information with the goal of better understanding how different state policies and management may be enabling or impeding industry development across the US. Next slide. And so our team synthesized state-level mariculture policy, categorizing and documenting a range of different policy attributes for aquaculture broadly and then marine aquaculture specifically. And this included state legislation, government initiatives, regulatory frameworks, and management structures. And we assessed these policy attributes for the 23 coastal marine states that are shown on the map here. Next slide. And in this work, which was subsequently published in the journal Reviews in Aquaculture, we ended up compiling data for 16 different attributes. And these attributes focused in particular on what we hypothesized could be enabling attributes for marine aquaculture. So aspects of policy that we thought might be able to support or facilitate sustainable development or could help reduce existing barriers to development. And to give you just a couple of examples of some of the attributes, we looked at whether states had an overarching Aquaculture Development Act or some sort of similar comprehensive legislation. We looked at whether there were specific regulations regarding marine aquaculture leasing. We looked at whether there was an aquaculture best management practices document that was either produced or officially endorsed by the state government. So that's just a few examples. And we felt like this initial synthesis could be a potentially very useful resource, but the data that we had compiled were buried in a static Excel spreadsheet in the appendix of this academic paper. And so that meant it wasn't easily accessible or user-friendly. And we were also concerned that it could become outdated quite quickly. And similarly, we were aware of some other complementary efforts to compile other policy information for the industry. For example, some work led by NOAA and also by the State Marine Aquaculture Coordination Network, or SMACN. But those resources also seem like they might be hard to access and hard to keep updated. Next slide. And so my team and Stephanie's team at the Sea Grant Law Center began talking about ways that we might be able to create what we envisioned as a one-stop shop for state marine aquaculture policy information. Next slide. And we were very fortunate to receive funding from the Builders Initiative to make this vision a reality. And so we received a grant in 2022 to develop a living database and a framework for standardizing state-level marine aquaculture policy data, with the goals of developing a database framework and web interface that could be easily accessible and user-friendly and interactive, that could be readily updated on a regular basis, and that would also include a broader array of policy attributes besides just those initial ones that we had focused on that were particularly looking at enabling policy. And we really wanted to make this a useful resource for state and federal aquaculture managers and policy analysts, academics, Sea Grant extension agents, and the aquaculture industry. And so for that first part of expanding the data set, our teams conducted initial policy research, including leveraging information that had been compiled by NOAA and SMACN, and we're able to add an additional 26 attributes to the data set. We still have been compiling them for the 23 coastal marine states that I had shown you on the previous map that's shown again here. We've also been exploring opportunities to eventually expand the data to include US territories and possibly also to include states bordering the Great Lakes, but for now we're just focusing on the 23 states you see here. And all the data that we compiled, we had them reviewed by state agency contacts to ensure accuracy and reliability of the data. Next slide. Okay, so adding the 26 new attributes to the original 16 attributes means we now have a database of 42 different policy attributes, the majority of which are listed here, although I don't expect you to read all this small font. We've organized the data into 9 themes that cover a really diverse array of aspects of mariculture policy, including policies related to biosecurity, capacity building, farm operations, leasing, legislation and regulations, management authority, spatial management of the industry, sustainability, and tribal authority. Next slide. We have a paper in PLOS One that provides more details about the process of attribute selection and data compilation and validation, and the development of the online dashboard that Stephanie is going to show you in a minute. This figure, again, don't worry about reading the tiny font, but this is again showing all of those different attributes grouped by themes, and the length of the bar indicates how many states have that particular attribute. And depending on the attribute, it ranges anywhere from no states to as many as 21 states. And so that gives you a sense of just how heterogeneous state marine aquaculture policy is. And so from there, I'm going to hand it off to Stephanie to tell you a little bit about how we've made this interactive.
Thanks, everyone. So we're going to do a quick dashboard tour. We don't have enough time today to really fully explore all that is in the dashboard, and there's different ways to navigate it. So what we wanted to do before we launched into the dashboard is we're going to put up a poll, and there's kind of 4 primary ways that you can navigate through the dashboard, which you can sort of see in this preview screenshot. There are these main page dynamic filters. There's policy specific dashboards. Then there's a way to do details, and we have a composite key. So we're just gonna give everyone a few minutes and we'll see which one of is the winner. And then that's what I'm gonna give you a brief tour of. So wow, look at all those coming in. Great job, everyone.
Steph, while people are responding to the poll, there's a QR code on the screen right now. Does that take folks directly to the main dashboard page?
Yes, the QR code on the slide.
Yes, the one on the slide. So if you're curious or you want to follow along on your own computer, you can pop up your phone and use that QR code to go directly to the dashboard page. You can bookmark that on your phone or text it to yourself like I sometimes do so that I can look at something on a larger screen, however you'd like to do that.
Yeah,
We've
Gina,
got
I will note
73.
that,
Oh, go ahead.
oh no, I was just going to note that we do know that some phones don't play well with the dashboard. So if you do use the QR code and get to it and it doesn't seem like it's working on the phone, we do know that it does work better on a desktop or a tablet.
Great. Thank you for sharing that. So the QR code is for convenience to find that direct link, but it might only work on a larger screen like a tablet, a laptop, or a desktop.
Great.
We are
Oh,
up
it's neck and neck. Yeah.
76% of you have weighed in on what you most want to see in the dashboard. Thank you. Anyone else like to vote? Please go ahead. If you're confused about what poll we're talking about, it might have popped up behind some other tab or screen that you have open in front of you. So if you minimize some things, you might be able to find it.
Well,
It does look like there's a pretty clear winner here, Steph.
yeah, it looks like the main page dynamic filters are pulling ahead. So as we do that, I'm gonna go ahead and navigate to the dashboard.
Great.
We'll get that pulled up. Okay. So the when we refer to the dynamic filters, we're talking about this main landing page for the dashboard. And I do want to point out that we do have more in-depth video tutorials about how to navigate the dashboard on our project website, which I'll share in a minute, but you can get there from a link directly from the page. So when you come back, I do encourage you to click on this and watch the full video tutorial. But the way that the dynamic filters work is that you can kind of toggle on and off attributes that you are interested in as a way to just kind of explore what's happening with the data. And so let's just start with, say I'm interested in knowing how many states have comprehensive legislation. So you click on that and you see the box change, right? So this is saying that there are 39% of the states in our database, which is the 23 marine coastal states, have comprehensive legislation with marine provisions. And then, when you highlight over it, it'll say, there's 10 states that do, don't, and 9 that do. Note that, this changing this one does not change the other filters, but as you go from 1, 2 to 3, you can tack on to that. So say now you're like, okay, well, how many have comprehensive legislation that also have aquaculture siting tools? And then that will kind of show you that 18 of the states, have aquaculture siting tools. And then let's see, do they have like BMPs? And then there's 14, that do that. And then as you kind of click in these boxes to say, like, I'm interested in ones with, yes, they have them, have the marine provisions. Yes, they have siting tools, and yes, they have BMPs. You can see how that narrowed it down to you're only now looking at 3 states that have all of those options, right? So these dynamic filters are just a way to start getting a feel for what you're interested in and what states might have that combination of attributes that then give you a researcher or a state agency trying to figure out, what other states are similar to their programs, a place to go. So that narrowed it down to Maryland, North Carolina, and Florida. And that's all that that dynamic filter does. That this page doesn't really take you anywhere else. It's just a research tool to explore the data and to kind of get a starting place. And then if you say, like, okay, I did this and now I'm really interested in Florida, the easiest way to then navigate to where you might want to find that information is to click on the policy detailed links, which will take you to a page that has that those boxes that Sarah showed earlier. And the policy detailed links are organized by state. So you can go to the drop-down menu, pick Florida, and now when you click on these boxes, it's going to take you to pages that have links that go out to either the statute or a regulation or, a policy document by the state. So that's one way that you can use those dynamic filters to filter the data down to give you a place to start and then go to the state information if you're interested in that. So that's like the quick and dirty tutorial for the dynamic filters. Before I navigate back to our slideshow, I do want to really highlight, I know for new users, this can be overwhelming and you may be like, I don't know what to do with all of this. You can navigate directly to our data table by just coming down on the home page, clicking on navigate to supporting data table. And this takes you to the spreadsheet that has all of the data in the dashboard, all of the information, so if you're more comfortable kind of looking at things this way, or if you want to kind of dig in, obviously, to the details, then we wanted to provide our data in a way that you can access it that way. So I'm going to navigate back to.
Hold on just a sec, Steph.
Yep.
I'm curious
Mhm.
about something on the dashboard page. You and I have talked about video tutorials, and I think there's a link at the top. Did you want to just show that off as well so that folks
Yes.
can see that there's additional help for how to navigate this?
Yeah. So if you click on that, that's going to take you to a video on our YouTube channel.
So now we're going to turn.
Oops, sorry. Which is a video walkthrough for that. That's the direct link. But we also have, if you go, and we're sharing this information in the chat, this is our project webpage for the dashboard. If you go to the project webpage, we have a lot of information on here, including Sarah's previous paper that she mentioned, along with the peer-reviewed article. But we have a link to the dashboard. We have developed a user guide that's a PDF document that walks through the dashboard, as well as a walkthrough video and a deep dive into a single attribute. So as I mentioned before, really encourage new users to take a minute to look at the user guide, watch the videos. It's really helpful to help figure out how to navigate the interactive features of the dashboard.
And Steph, we do have an additional comment in the chat. I don't know if you're aware of this. It sounds like not your project page, but the dashboard itself isn't loading in Microsoft Edge browser. So if you use Microsoft Edge, see if there's access to a different browser. I don't know if that's a Tableau problem. Sometimes as browsers update, things change.
It could either be a Tableau issue. We do know some also, depending on your computer, your firewalls, we have had some users unable to access the dashboard. So we do welcome, please email us. That's good to know that it's currently having problems with Microsoft Edge, because we can go back to our developer and, kind of see if it's something that can be fixed, or if you just need to use a different browser. So, yeah. Okay.
Thank you.
All right. So I know that that was really fast, and it was definitely not enough time for everyone to, kind of really figure it out. But it was meant just to be like a teaser for this is the resource and this is the data that we have in there. I did also want to mention, we only have a second to touch on this. The other pathway that you can use to explore the data is what we are calling composite keys. This was just a different way to categorize the states in particular areas. And so we took like subgroupings of attributes and placed them in these three categories: environmental safeguards, spatial management tools, industry tools and resources, and then gave the states a score of like 1 to 5. For instance, 1 meaning they only had one of those attributes in that grouping, or they had 5. And if you go to the composite keys, you can also get a visual of what states in the country have more of these attributes related to, for instance, industry tools or resources. So that's another area to check out if that type of visualization would be of interest to you. So showed you the dashboard resources on the website. Again, it's a PDF user guide, and then there are the walkthrough videos. And as Sarah mentioned, and I think there might have been some comments in the chat, the data is reviewed and it's reviewed annually, and it's done in partnership with the State Marine Aquaculture Coordinators Network. That the data is vetted annually by the state aquaculture contacts utilizing a Google Sheets template. So far, it looks like the system has been working. We've got really good engagement with our state agency contacts, and we get really great feedback every year. So we are in the process of doing our 2024 data update. The state agency review occurred August, September, earlier this year, and then it takes us some time to get the agency feedback out of their Google Sheets templates into the master data spreadsheet for the dashboard. And that's the process that we're in. And then the updates will go live prior to the March workshop that we'll be talking about in a minute. Okay. So with that, I've been talking for quite a while. I'm going to hand it back over to Sarah to just talk a little more about what we've been trying to do with the data.
Thanks, Stephanie. So one of the reasons we wanted to synthesize all of this information is that we hope that it can help states that are interested in further developing or refining their state aquaculture policy and regulations and allow for easy exchange of information and learning across states. And so with that goal in mind, we've taken a few of the policy attributes and developed policy briefs that take a deeper dive into each attribute, including sort of explaining more about that attribute, summarizing how different states operationalize that attribute within their policy, and providing some sort of considerations and guidance based on the research we've done. And these briefs are all on the Sea Grant Law Center website that Stephanie had showed you a minute ago. They're all about 5 pages. They're really nicely organized and should hopefully be a really useful resource. And we'll have QR codes linking you to each one of those on the following 3 slides. Next. So one of the policy briefs that we developed is about pilot frameworks. And so for each of the policy briefs, we show you what states have that attribute. So for example, only 2 states have specified pilot permitting schemes to support the trialing of marine aquaculture activities, although several other states do have some regulatory mechanisms to enable marine aquaculture on a trial basis, for example, for research or education. This one also has a peer-reviewed paper that has some similar content that's listed here on the bottom of the slide. Next slide, Steph. We also have a policy brief summarizing information about the requirements specified by the 19 states that mandate that marine aquaculture farms be operational and maintained to keep their lease, license, or permit. And we go through different ways that that gets required in different states. Next slide. And then the third policy brief that we've developed is about right to farm laws, which protect farmers from nuisance lawsuits. And these typically have been developed for land-based farming. And so this brief focuses on how states might want to clarify right to farm statutes to include aquaculture as appropriate. And so I hope you'll check out these briefs as they provide a nice example of the types of resources that can be developed from the policy database that we've assembled.
Great, thanks, Sarah. So with all of that like whirlwind tour about what we've been doing for the last couple of years, now we get to the point which is what we all invited you here to learn about today, which is, so where are we going? And we're incredibly grateful to have received additional funding from the Builders Initiative to continue our work on the dashboard and to, just keep conversations moving forward. So the supplemental or additional funding that we received is to develop and implement what we're referring to as a building consensus workshop series around best practices in state marine aquaculture policy. And so today's our kickoff webinar. We're so excited to kind of share this information with you and make you aware of the project and where we're going over the next 2 years or 18 months. And the next big event is going to be in March in New Orleans, where we're going to have a day-long exploring best practices and state aquaculture policy workshop. I'm going to talk a little bit more about the workshop, on the next slide, but it is the day before Aquaculture America. We're hoping that we may be able to leverage some of your all availability for coming into that conference, anyway. But we're kind of excited to see everybody in person. After that workshop, based on the discussions that are going to happen in that workshop, we're going to plan a series of follow-up, either virtual or in-person deep dive workshops where we want to focus on a couple of the priority best practices that have been identified by the participants in the workshop to really dig into, get a better understanding of what's happening, and potentially develop resources that can help all of you in the states potentially adopt those best practices if desired. And those will occur throughout the second half and into of 2025 and into 2026. And then we're going to wrap up in the summer of 2026 with another webinar to hopefully share all of the great information and resources that we have. So really, the big news is this workshop that we're planning on March 6th. And so the intended audience is state marine aquaculture coordinators. So all of you who are working in state agencies to manage your aquaculture programs, Sea Grant aquaculture extension agents who are both working with those state agency coordinators and the industry to provide information and technical support. We will be inviting federal partners from the NOAA Office of Aquaculture, EPA, Corps of Engineers, and then, other select partners if there is room available. But space is limited and it is intended to facilitate conversations among state agency regulators with respect to aquaculture. So the workshop is invitation only, but we are holding slots for state agency folks from all of our, coastal states as well as Sea Grant programs. So I believe that Mandy or others have dropped in the chat our interest form. So if you are interested in attending the workshop or staying informed about the follow-up workshops that will happen after March 6th, strongly encourage you to fill out the invitation form, the interest form. That's not a commitment to come to the meeting. It's just a way to let us know that you are interested and would like to be invited to come. So the workshop is going to be held. It's not associated with Aquaculture America. It won't be at the Aquaculture America Hotel. We'll be at Dockville Farm, which is this really nice facility slightly outside of the French Quarter, which we've been at other meetings at, and it's really nice, kind of outdoor, kind of quiet when it's not what you think of when you think of New Orleans, is what I'm trying to say. During the workshop, as I mentioned, it's going to be all day. It's going to be a combination of what I refer to as lay of the land presentation. So going deeper into like some of the things that Sarah, highlighted, like what is the status of pilot programs, or just, what is the state of some of these particular policy attributes. We're going to have facilitated discussions related to best practices and begin discussions to identify priorities, policies, and challenges that can really inform what's going to be the next year and a half of work on this project. And some of the reasons why we think that you should come is you will be able to learn from and network with your colleagues, but more importantly, share your experiences in your states related to your state policies, but also to be a part of this prioritization process for how we're going to structure the project moving forward. And I think, Sarah, did you have some additional thoughts for why everyone should come?
Sure. So this is a great opportunity to collaborate with experts, to engage in facilitated discussions with top stakeholders and innovators in aquaculture policy, It's an opportunity to help shape policy goals and contribute to the development of consensus-driven goals that will help guide the future of state aquaculture practices and how the industry is regulated. And there's an opportunity to also think about how we might want to craft legal frameworks, so work together to design the essential legal frameworks and tools needed to implement effective aquaculture policies.
So I'm gonna jump in real quick, Steph and Sarah. We do have some folks in the chat who said that the interest form link isn't loading for them. There might be a firewall issue with certain agencies. Would it be okay if we share Lauren's email again, and anyone who wants to express your interest in potentially being invited or getting more information about our workshop on March 6th, just lets Lauren know in that way?
Yes, yes. We can drop Lauren's email in the chat. You can send Lauren an email. We can also send the questions that are in the Google form via email and
Yeah.
manually enter your information. So, yeah.
Mhm. Okay, so we'll make sure that we follow up with that at the end of this webinar when we distribute the recording, as well as those of you who can access that link, please go ahead and use it. And Lauren will put her email in the chat one more time too.
Yep. Okay. Thanks. Yeah, and just before we, wrap up, just, thought like what else you might expect at the workshop and the entire series. And Gina may have more thoughts about this as well, because Gina will be our facilitator throughout the project. But it's going to be a dynamic or a series of dynamic workshops that we're really seeking to encourage collaboration and in-depth dialogue. All of the sessions will be, facilitated, which I think will really help us achieve, actionable outcomes from these discussions. And again, we really want to, help to build consensus among, the state agencies and others, just about, what are like the barriers and solutions for advancing the desired, kind of aquaculture policies. So I think, Gina, with that, I know there's been a lot of activity in the chat, but we've been throwing a lot at people. But so we just wanted to, give a chance to ask questions in the chat, or if there was, other thoughts that folks had before we, end up wrapping up.
Absolutely. Thank you, Steph. So I think that at this point in time, we simply want to ask folks, and Stephanie, you can actually take the screen share down at this point, I think. Let's stop that for a moment and let's see if anyone has, we know there has been a lot of activity in the chat. A lot of it has been pointing out, one browser didn't work to load the dashboard, but then another one did, but then there was a firewall issue. So we know technology can be really hard sometimes. Thank you for alerting us to those things. We're going to work with you to try to get everyone access to the things that would be most helpful to you, as well as find alternate ways to communicate about things like your interest in attending on March 6th, if for some reason our Google form doesn't work for you. But at this point in time, what we're really curious to hear is what's top of mind for you, having heard the discussion about sort of where this dashboard came from and what the work is moving forward, trying to build consensus on state aquaculture policies. I'm going to actually invite folks to come off of mute if there's something that you would like to say. I am noticing there's a couple things in the chat as well. I see Dana, you have raised your hand. Dana, why don't you go ahead and speak, and I'll take a look at what's happening in the chat.
All right, thanks. Yeah, thanks. Really interesting project here. My question, and I'm sorry I was driving, so I couldn't see all of the factors the attributes that were thrown up there. But for a background of this effort, is it all aimed at growth and production, reducing barriers, getting new people in, those sorts of things? Is that the principal motivation for this effort?
So I'll let Sarah chime in as well, but no, not necessarily. So when we're talking about it's barriers, maybe, yes, to the development of the industry, but that doesn't necessarily mean in your state that that would be growth. It could be that it's just increasing, taking away inefficiencies within state management processes that may be adding cost to state agencies. But then with respect to our project moving forward, when we're talking about barriers, it's barriers to adoption of best practices within state aquaculture policy, which again does not necessarily have to mean growth of the industry or number of farms or things like that. But Sarah, did you have other thoughts?
No, I don't think I have anything to add to that. And some of the attributes are about also like how can growth that does happen be more sustainable or adhere to environmental regulations. So I don't think we've taken like a particular stance on whether and how aquaculture should develop, but thinking about how some of the policy attributes are very focused on how the policy could become more streamlined, but some of them are focused more on sort of environmental or sustainability issues. Some are based on sort of things that might make things make the policy process easier to navigate for potential farmers. So there's a range of different kind of takes on the issue that get captured by the different attributes. Great question.
Thank you for the question, and thank you, Stephanie and Sarah, for responding to that. We've got a couple of questions in the chat around definitions in the dashboard. Stephanie, do you want to share your screen again?
Yeah, so there's a couple of questions about asking about definitions of the policy attributes. So I just wanted to navigate where you can find that. So if you want to kind of learn more about how these attributes are defined by our team, you go to the policy specific dashboards, you'll get to the 9-box screen that Sarah showed earlier. And then when you click on one of the boxes, you're going to go to a more detailed dashboard that just has a narrower number of attributes. And then for each attribute, there is an I button in a little bubble. And when you hover over that, that gives you the definition of that. So when we're saying Development Act or comprehensive legislation, we're looking at whether there's an overarching Aquaculture Development Act or comprehensive legislation intended to support the development of one or more types of aquaculture. This attribute does not include piecemeal regulations or statutes related to aquaculture. And so that is true for all of the different attributes. So the easiest way, I think, is to explore the dashboard and hover over these info buttons, and that will give you the best, I guess, view of what is included in each attribute.
Thank you, Steph. And we got a thank you in the chat for that explanation as well. Since we have a little time and some folks can't load that dashboard, I'm wondering if you'd like to maybe go back to it one more time with the screen share and kind of show maybe a different pathway of exploration, or maybe something related to one of the case studies that was referenced earlier.
Yeah, so yeah, I can go back to the home screen. So for instance, we mentioned that we did a policy brief on, right to farm. So if you wanted to kind of explore what information there is in that, that is a different pathway. So I showed the dynamic filters before. You can also do it policy specific. So if you're interested, well, we can do something different that we didn't talk about. So say you're interested in zoning, what states have zoning for marine aquaculture, that is included in our spatial management category. And so when you click on that box, it takes you to this more detailed screen about spatial management tools. And then you can look under zoning. It has the definition by the box, and the box as it is now just shows the breakdown between that 26% of states in the dashboard do have zoning for marine aquaculture, but the vast majority, 74%, don't. And so if you want to find out, like, okay, so which 6 of these states do have zoning for marine aquaculture, you click on the box, which then toggles off the states that don't have that, and it'll highlight, you got Alaska, Oregon, Mississippi, Florida, I think it's Delaware and New Jersey. Delaware always hides on me, right? So that's a way to do it. But then when you're within these, so in spatial management tool, there's 4 attributes, and within these, you can layer them on top of each other. So I just toggled off states that don't have zoning, but now say you're like, okay, which ones have zoning and also a citing tool? And these boxes changed when I toggled on the yes. So now this is showing 83% of those states that are highlighted in the map have citing tools. And so 5 of the 6 do have citing tools. And so the state that doesn't is Mississippi. So you saw that Mississippi disappeared, right? So within those 9 policy categories, you can then play around and layer on the attributes with that. And if you get overwhelmed, you can just come back down the very bottom, reset your view, and that will take you back. It'll just bring everything else on. So, you can look at something else, like who has a map of existing permits. And again, you see the other things. So they interact with each other, I think.
Thank you, Steph. Before you change your screen share, do you have open the tab to your project page?
Yes.
Okay, so there was a question in the chat about accessing the policy briefs that were mentioned earlier. Could you just show us on the website where the policy briefs are?
Yep. So when you click on the link to get to our project page, the policy briefs are in the box under the resources for users. And so they're right down here in this box, dashboard policy briefs. All 3 are linked to there, so you can download them from this page.
Awesome. Thank you for showing us that. And one additional question that I think takes us back to the dashboard in Tableau. The question was, if you want to see the specific information for a state, are there links to those states' websites for policy information or tools?
Yes. So if you know that you are interested in just one state, the best way to navigate that is to come down here to policy detail links. Ooh. And then you have a drop-down menu that has the names of all 23 states, and you can start to just get to that information. So I think like the question there probably relates to management authority detail. You can find out whether or not the state has like a centralized website for leasing, what their contact is, different information, and this will leak out to this. I didn't pick the best state because it looks like Massachusetts doesn't have a centralized authority, but it will get you to the government contact for Massachusetts, which is, where their permits are. And, you would be able to then get to staff contacts and things like that. So that's the best way to navigate the dashboard if you are interested in one particular state.
All right, thank you.
Just to add on to that, for any attribute where the answer was yes, this state has that attribute, we tried to always have a link to something that supports that. And if it's like an attribute where it's like a policy related to leasing or spatial planning, like we try to link directly to that like regulation or policy document or government website. So that's what all those links are. And in addition to accessing them the way that Stephanie's shown you, if you also go to the main data table, that also has links for all of that information.
Okay. Yes, Mark, I was going to come to you next because I noticed you had come on screen and now you've raised your hand. Go ahead.
Took me that long to find how to raise my hand. And two questions. One, on the freshwater aquaculture side, does it go into those regulations if there's separate regulations for freshwater aquaculture versus marine aquaculture? And then my second question, we're trying to look right now at states that have proactive policies that promote aquaculture or have established frameworks or programs to help aquaculture grow in those states. Is there a way to look at that, or is it really just regulations dealing with how aquaculture can be conducted?
Okay, well, I'm going to take your first question. So no, the dashboard does not include regulations for freshwater aquaculture. We did look at that, and it's challenging, right? For like Louisiana, Mississippi, Georgia, we got tilapia and catfish and other things. So we made the decision to not include that information in the current version of the dashboard, although there is an attribute that will indicate whether the same agencies regulate marine and freshwater aquaculture. And that's actually been one of the challenges for us expanding the dashboard to include the Great Lakes. So that issue's on our radar. I definitely would love feedback into how we might, think about that. But right now that's not in there. And then Sarah, I don't know, with respect to the second one, do you like any particular attributes that might get into like what states maybe have something that is, promoting the industry?
I did notice when you quickly pulled up the policy brief that one of those may have applied as well.
Yeah, so one of the attributes in the database is called supportive initiatives or policies, and it's some of ours are like very clear what they mean, and this one's where the definition is a little squishier because it was meant to just like capture any sort of government effort that might be trying to like encourage or promote development. And so that would be an attribute that might be useful to look at. There may be a few others, but that was like the one that immediately came to mind. The other thing I wanted to say just in response to the question about freshwater aquaculture is there's a few attributes that are just about aquaculture generally. And then we sometimes have like a follow-up question, like if a state has like an overarching aquaculture development act, then we ask whether or not it has provisions that are specific to marine aquaculture, because sometimes those acts are really like focused on just aquaculture generically or very focused on freshwater aquaculture. But we didn't do any like deliberate targeting of compiling information about freshwater aquaculture policy.
Yeah, and Mark, just to kind of, I think this capacity building category, it probably is what some of that information that you're looking for. And I just went to the one that Sarah was talking about supportive initiatives. And so there are 15 states that we have as a yes in that category. So, yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mark, and thank you, Stephanie and Sarah, for your responses to his question. As we move into wrapping up from today, Steph, what would you most like people to know?
Yeah. Well, one, that the dashboard is here and that it's available for use and that we are, really committed to making this data as accessible and usable so that if you're a state agency, you can find out like states that are similar to your own and reach out to your colleagues in other states. And that the conversations are going to continue over the next 2 years, and that we really want you to be involved. And so, yeah, let us know, fill out the interest form. And I know what I forgot to mention is that it was on the slide, but as part of the funding we received from the Builders Initiative, we do have funding available for travel awards to come for March. And so we don't want that to be a barrier for why you're not able to come. So please let us know if you're interested, even if you don't think you have the funding to be able to come.
Yes, please let us know. And thank you to everyone in the chat who was letting us know about having trouble accessing the dashboard or not being able to load the Google form. We're trying to be as accessible as possible, right? So you've gotten Lauren Freeman's email address. You can contact her directly as the project coordinator with any questions or to express your interest in maybe coming to the big in-person workshop on March 6th. Even if you couldn't load that interest form. Mandy has also joined several links in that chat right now, so I'm just going to briefly go through them. The first bullet is just, again, that building consensus workshop will take place in person on March 6th. It is invitation only, but we want to know if you're interested in coming. So the first link in the second bullet is to that interest form. If you're able to follow that link and fill it out, that's wonderful. If you cannot follow that link, just shoot us an email and let us know. If you know of someone else who was not participating today, but maybe should be invited, in your opinion, to this building consensus workshop on March 6th, go ahead and share the interest link with them, or go ahead and introduce Lauren or Stephanie via email to this other person if there's any issues with that interest form. We also invite you to follow the National Sea Grant Law Center on social media. You've got some links in there for Facebook and LinkedIn and X and the project page and the dashboard page. So if you're having trouble accessing those pages, let us know. Keep in mind there may be some firewall issues with different organizations, but let us know. We want to know if you're having trouble accessing those links. And you've got Stephanie's email directly in the chat as well, if you have any questions about the State Marine Aquaculture Coordinators Network. I know I just ran through a whole lot of stuff, and we've already got some folks hopping offline. We did want to find out how you felt about this webinar. So Lauren, if I could ask you to pop up our last poll of the webinar, tell us, was this webinar a good use of your time? Yes, no, something in between.
Yeah, and as everyone's dropping off, just want to say thank you again for joining us this afternoon. That we will be posting the recording, so if you joined late and want to catch up or share it with a colleague, stay tuned. We'll be emailing everyone who registered for the webinar with the link to the recording.
Great, thank you.